Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We broadcast 2 hours Monday through Friday from Missouri for the time being. And we talk about preparedness. We talk about survival. And we teach a class. Every single person involved in USA Prepares is a volunteer. Every one of us. No one gets paid. Not me and no one else. We all volunteer our time and try to share what we have learned in our lives. We share our experiences with our classroom. So that's who we are. That's what we do. We do not pay to be on the radio, nor do we get paid to be on the radio. Every one of us is a volunteer. John is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at Genesis Communications Network, the largest alternative radio network in the world. I'm Vincent Finelli. With us today is David in Illinois. Welcome, David. Do we have David?
Yes, you there?
I'm here. Great. I just wanted to welcome you to the front of the classroom. And we're going to be talking about the police. We're going to be talking about kidnapping. We're going to be talking about a gang of people who experiments on people against their will. We're going to be talking about pure terror. But before firsthand experience, David is going to share that with us. And I'm going to let him say whatever he wants. And so who is David? Well, David is a class member of USA Prepares who called and spoke with us and shared his information on the air, and I invited him to be an instructor. So David has become an instructor, and this was a while ago. And he's going to share his experiences with us today. But before we do that, David, I need to do a little bit of housekeeping, and I need to come clean about something that I did yesterday. And class, as you know, I am a teacher. I was not trained to be a teacher, but I am a teacher. And Rick Miller is a teacher. And a little over 2 weeks ago, I asked Rick if he would do something with me that has never been done before on radio. And that is, we would teach a class in doublespeak. Another term for that would be newspeak. So if you read George Orwell's 1984, the term was newspeak. Up is down, left is right. Things are backwards. You would hear people say things, but you couldn't figure out exactly what they meant. So what Rick and I did was we did a class on doublespeak. And doublespeak to us meant we would build a lexicon of terms that sounded scientific, that were not terms. They were not words. They were not phrases. They were not conjunctions. We made them up. And what I asked Rick to do was just a couple things. There was no script. I said, I'd like to do this. From my research, it's never been done before on the radio. I'd like to teach a class in Hegelian dialectics where you and I just say things that aren't real. And let's see how far it goes. I have no idea how much longer USA Prepares is going to be on the radio. It depends on a few things. It depends on Genesis Communications Network. We serve at their pleasure. And if the CEO, Ted Anderson, wants us to be on the air, we'll be on the air. If he doesn't want us to be on the air, we won't. Okay? Something can happen with the FCC. Do I have any inside information? No, I don't. I'm just saying that people come and people go. And the economy could change. The grid could go down. A whole bunch of things could happen, and we might not be on the air anymore. Now, not that I'm planning on it, not that I plan on leaving. It's just I don't know. So I wanted to do this type of a broadcast before it's all over. I wanted to have some fun, and I wanted to teach a class that no one has ever taught before. And that's what we did. So the guidelines were really simple, and I made them up. It's all my fault. And I asked Rick if he would build his lexicon, and I independently would build mine, and we would not share our lexicons. A group of words. And I had 4 or 5 pages of, I wrote these terms down. And there was no script. And the starting point was going to be about the moon landing, which typical form for Rick and me, when we say we're going to talk about something, we hardly ever talk about it. And we only talked about the moon landing for maybe 10 seconds. The rest of it just flowed naturally. And I suggested that if I said something, if I led the topic, and I were to say, and Rick, your thoughts, Rick would answer a completely different question in no relationship to what I had been saying. And I would do the same thing. And we would go off on tangents and try to do it with a straight face. Try to do it as if we were serious. As if this was a real topic, real science, real information, and important. We were acting. Now, neither of us had ever done that before, let alone had neither of us done that together before. So off we went. It was free form. And you heard it first right here on Genesis Communications Network. If you'd like to listen to it again, you can go to yesterday's Genesis Communications Network archives. You can go to Republic Broadcasting's archives. You can go to the Ron Gibson channel on YouTube. And you can find us and listen to it. So we started out with something real. And I told you how to save money with gasoline. That was absolutely real. No question. I mean, that was science. So based on the class believing that was real, and it was, then we went off into pure nonsense. And Adolf Hitler was quoted as saying, if you tell a lie big enough and tell it frequently, it will be believed. So what I did was, I thought, what would be a fantastic story to tell? Well, putting a satellite in space in 1930 would be a pretty tall tale. And then it flowed from there. Okay? It just came off the top of our heads. And I said things that were just unbelievable. They were not believable. They were fantastic. For example, but I mentioned some real terms. I mentioned that Radio Corporation of America was going to be the manufacturer of this transmitter, and that they needed a huge heatsink. So we bought Alaska for the heatsink. I mean, that's a pretty tall tale, right? I made up the term Glubic transition. And then I mixed that with a sentence as described by Stephen Hawking in the time-space realm. And I talked about the Castreum zone. There's no Castreum, C-A-S-T-R-E-A-L-M zone. No such thing. Of the ionosphere. And I talked about Bakelite, which is a real product. Bakelund was the guy who developed it. And I talked about the Hoppler zone, H-O-P-P-L-E-R. and the fourth stage of water. There's no such thing. I talked about transductive dielectric properties of plastic in combination with the salinity of the ocean's water as an electrolyte. No such thing. So, and I talked about the Dohastic theory of circular movement of light particles. Dohastic, D-O-H-A-S-T-I-C. No such thing. And then I talked about Marisa Loonkens, M-I-R-E-S-A, next word Loonkens, L-O-O-N-C-A-N-S. No such thing. So the whole purpose of that was to see what would happen. I was interested in many aspects of this. So what would our trolls do? How would our trolls react to this? Would they say, Vinny and Rick have lost their minds? That did not happen. We got comments on Ron Gibson's channel that were all positive. This was complete nonsense. So my thoughts went to, before we did this is what the mainstream media does all the time. They have talking heads and they have scriptwriters. So the talking heads say what the scriptwriters tell them to say. And they say it with conviction. And people believe it. Housing starts are up. Next sentence, housing starts are down. The economy is booming. People are working 3 jobs. This is the kind of stuff that comes out in the media, the dinosaur media. And when I was hosting meetups, people would say, Vinny, you're starting to talk about things, and we'd rather you talk about, preparedness. And I'd say, for years, I've been teaching you how to store matches for 20 years in a jar. Gardening, energy, solar power. I don't want to talk about it anymore. We've already done it over and over and over again. My job is to teach you how to think, not tell you what to do. Because when Vinny's not here anymore, who's going to tell you what to think or what to do? I don't want to do that. I want to teach people how to think. And when I had a computer manufacturing company, I would go head-to-head with IBM. And IBM would look at me and they'd say, it's just you versus a big corporation. How could we depend on you? And I'd say, you don't. I'm going to teach you how to not depend on me. I'm going to teach you how to build your own computers, how to service your own computers, how to build your own network, and you'll do it and you'll save all the money because you won't have to pay me. Because I can't service 8,000 customers by myself. But I can teach 8,000 people how to service their own computer networks. And that's what I did. So my job is to teach you how to think. And when I graduated from the university with my bachelor's degree in science, back in 1976, my dad, who was a school principal, put his arm around me and said, well, Ben, what'd you learn after these 4 years? And I looked up and I said, well, Dad, I learned a few facts, and I learned how to think. And I'm not sure if that was the right answer. As a matter of fact, I don't think it was the right answer. I don't know what the right answer was. To this day, I wish I knew, but my dad has passed away, so I'll never know the real answer. But that's what I want to do. I want to teach you how to think. We'll be right back. David's with us, and we're going to be talking about kidnapping in just a minute. I just want to finish this up. Please bear with me, because I feel I owe the class an explanation as to why I did what I did. It was for purposes of teaching. I thought that what would happen if you trusted someone and they led you along? At what point would you say, wait a minute, hold it, what? No, that can't be. That's what I was trying to teach you, to think for yourself. Because you had me as the host, and you had Dr. Richard Allen Miller as our resident physicist making this up. And I talked about the Emerson company. Emerson is a great company. And yes, they did make fans. But do you really think that you could have a fan powered by a couple D-cell batteries, or a battery bank of D-cells, blowing solar wind into a parachute? And the parachute, I alluded to the fact that that the company that made the parachute was International Latex, which it really was the company that was known as Playtex. And as a result, they looked at these little parachutes, these tiny parachutes, and they said, you know what, there's something else we could do with that. We can actually make bras out of those parachutes. You know, since we already have the shape, we can make a bra, and we can sell that. And we can use the truss construction of bridges to cross your heart. I mean, it's pretty fantastic stuff, right? And I mentioned about Bakelite and how it cracks when it's exposed to the zarkometric effect of the solar wind. There's no such thing as a zarkometric effect. So there you have it. That's what we did. We made it all up as we were going. And yes, there is a Big Ben, the clock in London. And yes, there were baby Bens. But they certainly weren't the timer mechanism for a rocket launch. And yes, there was a Mallory Battery Company and the Rayovac Battery Company and the Eveready Battery Company. But Eveready didn't invent saran wrap. They used wax paper to prevent their dry cells from leaking. And by the way, they all leaked. Not only Mallory, but Eveready and Rayovac. And they all still leak. So that's what happened. That's what we did. I've come clean, and I hope you all learned something. And I hope you were scratching your heads yesterday saying, what are these guys doing? Are they for real? Are they pulling our leg? What is this? David, I believe you heard the broadcast yesterday. What was your reaction?
I was really entertained. I was walking around. I was bathing my dog at the time, and I was cracking up. I was like, "This is real." I was like, wait, a satellite in 30? The Germans did the V-2 rocket during World War II, and that was the closest. You know, and that was what in the 40s.
Yeah,
early
that's right.
40s, late 30s, 40s.
That's exactly right.
So yeah. The Playtex thing was really good, though. I mean, that was in Alaska. That was great. That was
well. I said we bought Alaska because I didn't use the word heatsink, but I said that electronics work better when they're cool, and that we needed to cool this transmitter, so we bought Alaska. I mean, that's crazy, right? But I said it sincerely, right?
Yeah. That's why I was like, are they okay? And I did look at the comments after that. I did go on there and look at the comments. I said, I got to see what they said about this. I got to see if this is just me. And I seen those comments too. I said, you got to be kidding.
Yeah.
So I looked too right when it was done.
So, class, if you'd like to see the comments, just go to the Ron Gibson channel, Gibson, Ron as in Ronald, Ron Gibson on YouTube, and there you'll find two broadcasts, What Really Happened by Mike Rivero, and you'll find USA Prepares. And you'll find that we only get a couple hundred views a day, and, the trolls just, when they come out in force, and they just absolutely trash us, but not yesterday. I don't think they knew what to do. I think they were kind of stunned at not knowing what we were talking about. And as a matter of fact, and Rick was great. I mean, I would ask him a question, and he would answer a completely different question. As a matter of fact, he would say 3 or 4 things in the next sentence that were totally disjointed, but the way he said it, with authority, made us think, I guess he's right. Whatever he said, yeah, I'm with him. Whatever he said. So I had a lot of fun. So I'll let you know if we ever do it again. David, we're going to talk about you when we come back. So just one more thing. When I was in Virginia, I started teaching high school. I wanted to teach a class on how you could start your own company. And I wanted to teach it at high school, but I needed a vehicle to do that. So we used computers. And what I mean by that is we manufactured computers. So I had my high school students run a company that we built with students. And I taught them how to start their own company, how to be responsible, how to build quality products better than anybody else, and be successful. But the vehicle was actually a product, which was a personal computer and printers and networking and things like that. And when I left, it fell apart because the school didn't want to teach concepts on how to do something. They wanted to teach, learn how to regurgitate this, memorize this, and we're going to test you on how well you can regurgitate that. I didn't want to teach that. I wanted to teach how to think. So when I left the school system, it fell apart. And that's what I did with the meetup group. I taught the meetup group how to think. And when I left, it fell apart because no one really wanted to teach those kinds of concepts. They wanted to teach things. You know, this is how you plant a seed. And I wanted to teach people how to learn for themselves. So one of the reasons that our ratings are not as high as other broadcasts, we're not as popular as people who talk about what happened in the news. That's what most radio broadcasts are about. What happened? Who did what? Follow the Kardashians. Let's see who's got the biggest rear end. You know, inflated with injectables. That's what people want to hear. I'm not interested in any of that, and I won't do it. And I won't do things for ratings. I'm only interested in teaching, and I'm only interested in working with people who want to teach. And that's what we do here at USA Prepares. So I will tell you this, that if I ever do a stunt like that again, I will tell you beforehand. But I did tell you beforehand twice. Twice yesterday. If you listen to yesterday's broadcast, you will hear me say that we are going to talk about doublespeak. And I said it twice before we did it. And then during the broadcast, Rick and I had a great laugh about, we actually were doing doublespeak, and we admitted it. So there were 3 times yesterday during yesterday's broadcast that we said, here's what we're doing. But I don't know if too many people actually got that when we said it. So enough of that, unless you have another comment, and then we'll get into David's story. David, do you have anything else you want to say about yesterday's doublespeak class?
No, it was good. It's nice to break it up once in a while. It was interesting. It was good, entertaining.
Great. Okay, David. So you have been kidnapped. You've been threatened. You've been tied up. You've been experimented on. You had a real tough go of it. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, tied up. The correct term's handcuffed.
Well, that's what I meant.
Okay. I'm just handcuffs, and handcuffs didn't fit my wrist, so it would be the ankles. But now, it wasn't just the police and his FBI buddies, and maybe I should tell, in case somebody's not listening. My father, a quick what he did. I'll give you a quick break. He did classified stuff for the Marines and questionable things, and that's where I think what he got involved with there, he enjoyed so much when he came back. Him and his buddies couldn't stop. He worked in law enforcement. He also worked cloaked under Department of Energy. He worked classified stuff under Department of Defense and Department of Interior. Okay, that's a quick breakdown. The problem was, when I was a child, he would take me with him, and the things that I've seen, and then went to school, notified them. They would ask me, what'd you do over summer break? And, when you go to school, they ask you what you do over summer break. Hey, this is what I did. They were doing strange things with naked little girls, and they're like, what? So instead of, now they're called Child Family Services, when he went to lose custody of me, instead of him risking getting thrown in jail and the rest of them getting caught, they took me away at night. And that's when he made the deal with University of Chicago to use me for research. Now, since I spoke about that before, I assumed that was an unusual case at University of Chicago. So somebody sent me some YouTube videos about a place called Bikini Island, and I didn't know about that place. And I watched it. And it was interesting that the people that suffered from Bikini Island and the nuclear bomb testing there, University of Chicago is the same place to test and research them. And in that documentary, they released information, somebody did, where they knew these people were contaminated, and yet they sent them back, told them they were okay, and they were going to study it to see the effects. So it's not an unusual situation what they did with me. But the problem with me was they did it intentionally. It was like a bad joke for me because one minute I would get vision back or they needed to use me for a procedure and I would be called in or, a situation like in them situations. So it was a rarity for me to go to school. School was a rarity, but most of the time I hung out with. I was in patrol cars, FBI cars, in the police station. And while I was there, that's when I seen the things that I seen, which I talked about before. I talked about the criminal game that was, created for me because I asked some questions about comments on what the codes on the radio meant, and they came up with the criminal game. Now, one thing I will say is not just, I thought judges were the guys, you get on that bench. There was a situation that happened with him that we were coming home from work, and these guys, I joked around, and I called beer policeman's aftershave because these guys would drink on duty, off duty. Right when they got off duty, they would drink on duty. And if you've been around somebody that drinks all the time, it comes out. It has a smell, and it just is bad, and you can tell. So how do you not know these officers and badge-carrying guys are not drinking when you can smell it, And I was always shocked about that, even ever since I was a little kid. But anyway, we had come home from work, driving around. He was already pretty wound up, and I'd put the seat back in the car because I didn't want to see it coming. He hit somebody. I didn't want to see it coming. And I was about 18 at the time, and some old... now, it's interesting. You said Rick Miller has a Datsun 280. He had a Datsun 280 ZX, 81, 82 model, and it was two-tone color, dark brown and a lighter brown on the sides. And this big boat of a car almost hit him. He was all over the road. Well, here's where it gets interesting. I was to stay down. They didn't know I was in the car, this old couple in this old car. They probably put about 1.5 inch scratch, like you would take a sewing needle and scratch on his car. Well, after a while, he said, no need to call the cops. I'm a cop. He was in a uniform. And so later he's called into court. We go to court, and he says, I'm a cop. They're going to they're not going to get away with this. These people rolling, one's in a wheelchair. One's on crutches in the cast. They both have neck braces on. And my dad's like, looking at him. Now, I had to go and sneak in the courtroom because he never wanted me in the courtroom because I had that department still looking for me. And they had their car pulled up on a record. It was demolished. Okay, his scratch is still on his little sports car, and his judge gave this case to him, and it was hilarious because this judge had to know that this didn't happen. This couldn't happen, And that's when it dawned on me: judges are just as corrupt as these guys are. I said, I can't believe this. It was amazing. But, that situation, I bring it because I should tell you how it was such a volatile situation. This man was a ticking time bomb. We lived in a nice place on the 5th floor, and the neighbors thought it was great that they had a cop living next door. He came home. He was even calling people, his buddies, to try to go after this judge. He was so mad. And the neighbors are out, and I left because I was terrified of him when he got like that. And I just want to bring that up to tell you how it's not just the cops I saying, it's just something I noticed about judges. You see that, and it was hilarious. It was such a hilarious situation. I could not stop laughing. That was the best 4 days of me not being able to eat out of the whole time because I got jawed. I couldn't help it, but that was worth it. To see the look on his face, I'll never forget that. He thought just because he had that badge, huh?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that your dad did, and correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you said this. Questionable, classified things when he was a Marine. in the early
yes.
days of his Marine term. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
okay, go ahead. Sorry.
And that he became accustomed to that, and that he couldn't stop doing these questionable things. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what were these questionable type things?
Okay. Now, mind you, he brought pictures back of this stuff, and I seen these photographs because and they would tell me about this. Now, he also did a classified. They did a classified experiment that he shared with me, and they actually made everybody sign non-disclosure. He shouldn't have shared that with me either. But what they had him do when they first went over to Vietnam as a security force, right off the bat, the beginning, they were the first guys over there, and they were supposed to help the people. Well, they were rounding up and helping young kids and women, feed them. Well, they decided not to feed them. They were ordered not to feed them but once a day. This way they can control them easier because the kids were rambunctious. The problem was some of these guys enjoyed boys, and like he said, some, like him, enjoyed girls, little girls. When they gave him a problem, they would take them out in the woods. And those are the bodies that he brought back and had the pictures of these kids. And the problem is he enjoyed being around the little girls too much, and he couldn't stop it. And some of the guys that came back with him liked the little boys. So the first time they took me for that summer, some of these guys that came back with him, they had badges too. And I'm sitting there, everybody's naked, and they're, except for me, they're trying to get me to get naked. And I'm like, I'm just out of first grade, and I'm like, this isn't right. I'm not, no. So that's what they do. And they even hid other children with me while I was being hidden. So, it was not an unusual. It's something that persisted. So you see the Epstein situation. It's not that. It's more expanded. Is what you think?
And let's talk a little bit about that when we come back. I have my own thoughts on that, and I'll share them with you. And let's see what you think about that. David in Illinois. We'll be right back. So, class, about Jeffrey Epstein, he was found in his jail cell in New York on the floor, unconscious, with marks around his neck. And so some people might say, was it the guard? No, I don't think so. Was it another inmate? No, I don't think so. So who was it? Well, Jeffrey Epstein is a convicted pedophile. And pedophilia is something that we can all agree on as being wrong. If you look at Bernie Madoff, well, he was a swindler, he was a criminal, he built a Ponzi scheme. But some people would say, well, yeah, but that didn't affect us, so what do I care? Well, in the case of Jeffrey Epstein, it's not like that. Everybody cares because pedophilia is just wrong for everybody. Well, except for those perpetrating the crime. Well, so who is he surrounded by? Who are his cast of characters? Well, millionaires, people of wealth, sycophants, politicians, lawyers, people of power. And so it seems to me that Jeffrey Epstein is really not this really bright guy who is a brilliant financier. And I think he was a tool of the deep state, of the spy network corporations. And I believe that he was the guy who would lure, through his minions and his employees, people to Pedophile Island, lure them on the pedophile airlines, meaning his Lolita Express, to the island he built, to his living quarters all over the world. So he would have these influential people come there, and I think there were pictures taken, I think there were recordings, I think there were videos, and I think he used that to say, oh, by the way, how are you going to vote on this next thing? Oh, by the way, let me show you this dossier we have on you. Or someone else would show him the dossier. And so by luring these weak individuals of power into this pedophilia. They were able to be manipulated. That's my thinking on this. David, does that make sense to you?
Oh, yeah. I personally don't. I will be surprised if he's convicted and goes to jail. With my dad and his connections, I can't even prove he's deceased, except for there's a tombstone. What they did with my dad, what my dad was allowed to get away with, and the people he was under, and the president of the University of Chicago that was helping him, they've been actually up until not long ago investigating me for snatching me. So think how bizarre that is when they're pulling you into court. And when I finally got my insurance turned back on, they're accusing me of doing these medical procedures on myself as a child. Well, if that's the case, somebody owes me a whole lot of royalties for coming up with some unique procedures as a child. You know, I mean, so they could say anything they want, but I'll be surprised. I will truly be surprised if he shows up in jail. I think that guy has too much. My dad's hung around with a lot of these. There's pictures with him with some of the people that's been at that island. Whenever I discuss this stuff, even discuss stuff at the school, and I became a whistleblower at Illinois School for Visually Impaired, which they covered up also. And my dad's like, that's what these kids are for. You don't understand. He never got that out of his system. He knew that's where the power was. He helped. They helped him. Tit for tat. And
there's a young lady who was a victim. She claimed she was a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. And she was underage at the time, and she became a sex slave, and she was passed around to some of Epstein's associates and was raped by them, and that was her job, to be raped. And she felt, I'm putting the pieces together from what I've researched, that she felt that was her job, to be raped by these people, and she couldn't get out, because if she escaped, they'd kill her. So she was stuck being raped whenever they felt like having her raped by whomever they felt like having her raped by. Now, does that jive, that logic, does that jive with what you have seen and experienced?
Yeah, I'll give you a good analogy of what it's like. When you know what tiger sharks do when they're eating, they're swarming, they're feeding on a big whale carcass. Okay. Now you look at them as coming around you and thinking they got somebody lower, and all of a sudden a great white comes, they all flee. Look at those people that are getting away with it as the great white. Everybody else flees. That victim is there with nothing. They're always going to be fighting for any rights or anything, and that's what it feels like. Left alone.
Class, you're listening to firsthand experience of the Epstein-like criminality. David's with us. He's been with us before. He's been with us multiple times. And I'm not telling him what to say or what not to say. He's saying whatever he wants to say. And he can stop at any time. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. David in Illinois is with us, and we've been talking about pedophiles. David, at the end of World War II, there were 13 trials called the Nuremberg trials. And there were horrific crimes against humanity. Executions, concentration camps, gas chambers, firing squads, torture, and abuse of people on many, many levels. And some of the video that I've seen of those who had committed these horrific war crimes, they were asked, and I'm not talking about the leaders, I'm talking about, the lower level military of the Nazi regime. So why'd you do this? And the questions seemed to be answered very much the same way, no matter who was asked. Well, it's just what we did. So somebody started it. Somebody started the executions. Somebody lined people up and shot them. Somebody was involved in raping, pillaging, stealing, abuse of women. somebody started it, and then it just snowballed. Is that what this was like when you mentioned that once your father was involved with in the Marines in Vietnam, he couldn't stop? Is that the kind of thing you're saying?
I hear what you're saying, but in my mind, we all have a choice. And I think if somebody's enjoying it and somebody truly can't get enough of it, there's something else going on. They choose to do that. They could have chose to deny to do it. Government officials tried to get me to do things at the school, the Illinois School for Visually Impaired, and I flat out refused because it was not the right thing to do. I have a conscience, and there's things, it's just not right. So, I do think, but I do see both sides. I can see you're in a soldier situation. There's some soldiers that are there, and they're going to do whatever they're told to do no matter what. Hey, if they told to go, blow this guy away or do whatever, or rape these villagers, okay, I'm ordered to. I'm just doing what I'm told, and I can see both sides, but personally, we're all individual thinking beings. We can choose to say no. Mm-hmm. And obviously, if you go back, you enjoyed it. You can go with the first option, the first choice, and say, look, I was ordered to do it. But when you go back and do it again, you obviously enjoyed it, and that's my opinion. That's my observations of it.
Are you saying that the police were involved in pedophilia in the Chicago area? Is that what you're saying? Oh, yeah.
I told you on one of your other shows, before this situation ever came up, the first girl that he was ordered to hide with me she told me she was 14 years old. And she was taken out and gotten small underclothes, and that's what she wore. And I was only in 4th grade at the time. And all of a sudden she was there for months, and then she was gone. I never seen her. When I came back, she was gone. Never seen her again. But it was a regular thing, where he would bring, as I got older, he would bring other young. I even had a friend stay with me, and we came home from another altercation in the woods, and there was a high school age girl at home. He's like, that girl, look, she's only about in high school. That's not the first time, and they bring him back from the city. So it's not an uncommon thing. It's things that I seen. To me, it was normal. To my friends, it was, wait a minute. And their parents didn't like it either, because they told their parents too. And my punishment from when their parents created trouble is, we got to bring him into court. Hey, do you need a procedure to try him out on? Okay. As long as I was in there in the University of Chicago being used for procedures, the courts couldn't touch me. Therefore, I could not testify. Therefore, they were free and clear. Couldn't do nothing about it.
What you're talking about, David, is a series of horrific crimes. To keep you out of court, they would do medical experimentation on you to say, well, it sounds like you're saying that, well, we can't have him in court testify because he's on the operating table, or he is recovering from an operation, or he's going to have another operation, or he is too weak. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what happened.
David, I'm sure you've read some of the emerging stories about Jeffrey Epstein. Is any of it Epstein? Does any of it sound like it's being made up, or does this sound like he is just in a larger setting than you have witnessed?
Yeah, I think he's in a larger setting. I really do. Even as an older adult when I was in college, and I thought I was away from my father until the politicians got a hold of him when he was working for the Department of Defense, and I became a whistleblower for the school, which they covered up, by the way. He tried to convince me that this is what is done. I need to shut my mouth, deal with this. In other words, he wouldn't have to be the one to do it. Somebody would make a phone call, and that's all that would have to happen. And what snapped on me was when he said my Dee would be a victim. And that's when my brother tried to do something when I was younger. I had an older brother that tried to interfere. He even stole the gun. He was so upset what he was seeing done. He was willing to go to those extremes to deal with my father. Okay? I never understood why he went to that extreme. I didn't understand for me until my father threatened Dee like that. I would have shot him myself. That's when it clicked on me. What that kind of threat and to take something away that you care about like that and to threaten it. And that's what I'm willing to do. And he said he wouldn't even have to do it. All he had to do was tell somebody else they would do it for him and make the phone calls.
And from what I hear you saying is that Dee is your wife, mm-hmm. and I've talked with her off the air when I call you at home. She sounds like a lovely, lovely person. And so I believe you're saying that they threatened to harm her, which caused you to have an instant realization of how serious this really is and what is really happening. Is that right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I told
I
my
got to tell
father,
you, I'm with you. I am absolutely with you. And, you know, if our daughter were threatened, or our daughter were harmed by, you know, some sycophants, I might come unglued. Now, I can't say whether I would or not on the air, okay? But I might. And I'm sure the class knows exactly what the answer is. I might come unglued. And Guineith Isaacs sent me an email about a guy that she read about who had a hammer. You know, a hammer like you would use for carpentry. Mm-hmm. And he was testing out this hammer on pedophiles to see how it worked. And that's what has now started. People have decided that, you know what, it's not working. The pedophiles are getting away with horrific crimes. And this one particular individual decided to test his hammer on a pedophile. Now the question is, what's going to happen to the guy with the hammer? Will he be prosecuted for meting out justice? Or what?
He probably will. And that just seems to be the norm. The one that deals with justice that should be done, because the justice system will not do anything, is the one that always pays the price.
Do you think judges are involved in pedophilia as well?
Oh, I think so.
Tell us about the blue glue. What is it?
Oh, okay.
What is it that is stronger than epoxy, stronger than super glue? It's an unbreakable bond. What is it about the blue glue?
That bond is just amazing to watch. Now, I clear up something here real quick to understand why I think I lived the longest unwanting apprenticeship in law enforcement probably in United States history. I 7 years old on. And we're not just talking about a day or two here. We're talking about years, okay? These guys would do anything. One FBI buddy of his, I was home for just 3 days for school. He shot his wife twice. Okay? They needed to deal with the body. She just happened to not be dead yet. Called my dad. I'm right there. These guys are talking about dealing with this, and the only thing that stopped them is somebody heard the shots and called the ambulance. So they had to find a way to cover up and interfere with the investigation. No questions asked. I mean, I could not believe it. And I'm right there. No big deal. Then, hey, if they search my house, if we can't get this, we need to hide all these illegal weapons. Okay, bring them over here to our place. Just don't touch them. Oh, hey, I don't even want to know any. I don't even want to be here. And they had to go in there. And my dad was the one. So look, I'll wait up. I'll say I'm investigating the case. When she wakes up, I'll let her know what's going to happen to her daughters if she don't change her statement. So they got it ruled an accidental shooting. How do you accidentally shoot somebody twice when you're drunk and you're supposed to be an officer of the law? FBI on top of that. They would do no questions asked. Just hey, I need this. That's how strong it is. It's amazing. You have to be there to see it. I don't think you can just truly explain. I really do. I think you have to be there to witness it. And I don't see too many people being able to witness it unless you're there. I mean, how can you do something like that? And then so commonly just cover it up and then threaten the kids if they don't, So I don't blame what the lady did. Her daughters were at risk. I don't blame her. So I don't, and I feel bad for some of the other cops if they don't pull the line until they prove themselves. I said, well, how do you deal with them guys? We make them go in everywhere first.
So they get punished by, okay, here's the dangerous situation. You guys go in first, and you guys are going to be the first ones to get shot. Is that what you're saying?
Until you can prove to us you're loyal.
David in Illinois and I will be right back. Riveting discussion. Eye-opener. First-hand experience. We'll be right back. David, I know a former cop. I know a couple of former cops, and I know that one former cop is absolutely terrified that some of the people that he sent to prison will find out where he lives, and they'll extract revenge on him. Do you think there are other cops that feel that way?
Oh, yeah. A quick comment, really quick, about what we were just commenting on. They made it perfectly clear to me that the other officers do not have to participate and agree with what they're doing. They just have to shut their mouths and look the other way. So it's when you see that guy taking drugs home or setting up somebody, you just shut your mouth if you're asked about it. And that's why that's simple. And maybe in some people's conscience, they can do that. And that's what they do. And that's why you have whole loyalty. Because to some people, hey, I just say I didn't see it. I'm not involved in it, so I'm not doing it. And some of these guys even carried extra badges, and they would give badges from other departments to people that were loyal, that weren't even cops. And when I seen that, I'm like, why are you getting badges from these places? I don't understand. I ask questions. But yeah, I think because some of these people went to prison for not doing nothing. I've seen people pull over. They pointed out they can pin anything on anybody they want. It's always the badge's word, always first.
David, we're talking now about cops literally planting evidence on innocent people to have them arrested and convicted. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. Especially if they had a case. When I was riding with them, anytime if they had a really case they needed to deal with and there was nobody there, they just picked somebody walking down the street. Normally they were black people, because to them, black people, they told me, they are born criminals. They cannot help it. Only 2% of them could control it. The rest of them, it's something in their blood. They cannot control it. So all they had to do was pull, if they couldn't find anybody for a case, they needed it solved, they just find somebody walking down the street. And that was disturbing to see. Because to me, when I was young, I did not see the difference of people, except for the fact that, hey, this guy's a little darker than me. And so I was really confused when that's the whole criminal game basis was that right there. And they could just pull over and take anybody. And then they would take whatever they wanted from them. That's really what was, some of them people probably worked hard to buy whatever they had. They didn't care. They liked it. They took it. What are they going to do? What are they going to do?
Let me see if I've got this right. You're saying that the cops in the Chicago area, if they wanted something that somebody had, the cops would steal it. And then what would the person who was the victim of this crime by the police do? What would they do? Call the cops? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. What do they do? Now, when my dad went to the federal government, he actually still targeted women. And he can find out what they were, where they lived, if they had a carry permit by checking their background on their license plate. So if he knew there was a woman and she had a good area and lived in a good area, had a nice car, and she had a concealed carry permit, she probably had a good gun. He wanted that gun. He knew she was not going to be one to really fight back and argue. And what's she going to do? She's going to go to court and pay a lawyer $10,000 to get a couple $1,000 pistol back? What are you going to do?
David, the things that you're saying are opening people's eyes right now. What you just said, I'm sure, opened a lot of eyes by saying, okay, nice car, nice possessions, concealed carry permit, probably a Sig Sauer or something, not a Jennings, maybe a Smith & Wesson, maybe a Colt, top quality piece, and they can literally take that. And then what would the victim do? Would the victim file a police report that the cop took their gun? People are afraid of the cops now, and for darn good reason, because of the things that you're talking about. Maybe I'll tell you a story when I come back about exactly what you talked about. So the sheriff's office seems to collect guns. And what happens is a deputy may pull someone over, find that that person has a gun, and then confiscate the gun as evidence. It ends up in the evidence room. It's locked away. And then a couple years later, they can't find it. It's lost. Sometimes the sheriff's office has a public auction, and they sell guns, which is stolen property, stolen from people. It's called evidence. And sometimes it's used maybe in a crime, and sometimes it's not. But lots of times it ends up in the evidence room, and the people don't complain about, hey, you stole my gun. I want it back, because they're afraid that the cops are going to be rougher on them if they try to get their gun back. So they kind of let the cops keep the gun. Now, I know for a fact that in our local rag, the weekly rag that comes out in our county, every once in a while they have a sheriff's auction, and they list all these guns that are for sale. Why is the sheriff selling these guns? Why don't they go back to the family from which they were stolen? Why? Because I think the cops can get away with it. Is that why, David?
Yeah. And usually they take them to pawn shops. And sometimes they haven't even gotten out of their squad car uniforms when they take them into pawn shops and put the cash in their pockets. So I see both of them. I think if they're not going to give them back to the people that own them, they should be melted down and destroyed. And that's my opinion. That's strong opinion, I believe. If they're not going to give them back to the owners, then that's what should happen. If it's used in a crime, then that's one thing. But not, and it's stolen, it should be given back. It's their property. I've had that happen to me.
What do you mean?
I had some weapons stolen from me. The police got them back. My dad got involved, and he said, hey, they're going to keep them. Let them have them. What are you going to do? Never got them back. They kept them.
Okay. So, David, in your firsthand experience, do you know of situations where there is let's say, a complicated plot the police are involved, but yet in this, let's say they want to take down a group of, we'll call them real criminals, and the police actually want to take down this group. Let's say there's 10 of these real criminals. Do you think there are sub-agendas within the individual police officers that they have an individual motive where they can profit by taking down this group of 10 criminals, and they will pursue that so that they can get their agenda taken care of?
If I think what you're saying correctly, I can, yes. They're always looking out for what they're going to get out of the situation. The ones
that's what I'm saying.
It's not about their pay. It's about what they can take out of the situation. And you will always find things missing, not turned in, supposed to be evidence there. They have a different set of laws. They don't have any laws. They can do what they want. And if they get caught, they'll throw it in your face. Say, look, there's not actually a specific law for us not to do this. So what are you going to do? You know,
David, we've all heard stories about, the police pulling over this pretty girl, and then the pretty girl gets an offer. Tell you what, here's how it goes. Well, I'm going to have to arrest you, or you can pull your pants down. Pick one. Do you think that really happens?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Now, I'm glad you went into that because I'm going to bring something up, but I will also bring in a case that was on the news up in Chicago. This cop pulled over these girls, and they were young girls. He actually accused them of being drunk, which they weren't. So he made them strip and run around their car on the side of the road. So that's, he could they had to do this. And they didn't even deny he did it. And he's still working. Okay. But I'll get into one other question. I'm not a fan of the Obamas. I'm going to get that point blank and clear right now. Obamas were living in the area where University of Chicago was and I was at. When he became a senator, his wife was working at the University of Chicago. She was making like roughly under $40,000 a year. When he became a senator, she got a 10 times raise. The cops in that area of the city were furious. They would drive around looking for her, to pull her over for anything, just to harass her, to show that even though he's a senator, they still had more power than she did. And they would laugh about it because she would get mad and there was nothing she could do about it.
So you're saying that the city police of Chicago, Illinois, would follow Michelle Obama around when her husband, Barack Hussein Obama, was a senator, and there were more cops than there were of her, and it was just plain old harassment because they didn't like her for some reason, or him?
They were upset. Mind you, in that part of the city, they have several different police forces, okay? There's several different police forces there. And once he became a senator, she wound up getting a tenfold raise, just under $340,000, I believe they said it was. 330 some odd thousand from 30 some odd, 37, 38, 39. I don't remember the exact number. But that's a heck of a raise, okay, for any place. They were very upset about it. And so they literally would follow her just to show that they still had more power than she did. They could take her and pull her over for anything they wanted. There was nothing she could do about it. And they did. And they would laugh that she would complain and get mad she didn't do anything. They didn't care. That's how they treated black people there anyway. So they figured they got power because they were black, didn't care. They still had more power.
Do the police provide false testimony to get people convicted of crimes that the people didn't actually do?
I never had to sit in court because father and the university never wanted me to be anywhere near court. The only time I sat in the courtroom was when that accident, and I had to go separately and sit in the back. So that I cannot testify to.
How about,
I cannot actually.
Okay.
Because I didn't see it directly. So I would suspect they falsified everything else, and if they're pulling somebody over or stopping somebody on the street and they need to pin a case on them, and they could just say he did it, and I've seen that, common sense would tell you, yeah, they would do that in court. They would have to. How would they convict them?
What do the police? Yes. What do the police do with drugs? Do they carry them in their squad cars and then use them as evidence to plant for people?
My dad did two things with his drugs. He would either take them home or he would keep them in the car and transport them somewhere else. And now when he was with the federal government, for some reason, some of the drugs he would take way to the state of California, which was strange. And the only reason I think he was doing that is because California was a legalized medical marijuana selling. So I think they were selling it there and making the money. But that was marijuana. When he was there, if they got large amounts of cocaine, I mean, he was share a crime scene. I mean, I've seen case files with drugs. I don't even know how they got so much cocaine out of one vehicle. That stuff they wanted everybody to know we busted them. But your smaller stuff or your trunk-sized marijuana or whatever, that stuff, it didn't make it in. It didn't make it in. Now, we've had situations where I have seen where they did plant drugs on people. There's YouTube videos. They've done it here in my city. My dad sent me a video of it. I assume he got it off YouTube. Because he would have access to surveillance cameras. He said, hey, look what I came across. This is in your city. And they caught them guys right on camera putting drugs on people, on their vehicle, in their front bumper. And they would have a false identification. They act like the dog would identify, but the dog just sat, didn't know what to do. And so, yeah, he was always sending me surveillance photos, videos, and things like that. I didn't want to see this nonsense. I mean, I have a lot of problems with this. His philosophy was the more he shared with me, the safer him and his friends were. Okay. But yes, a lot of times they would take the drugs back, unless it was a large amount where they got
David,
Good.
I was at a gun show on the East Coast, and I used to like to go to gun shows. I don't go to them anymore, for a lot of reasons. But I happened to be at this gun show, and I used to like antique-type firearms. I thought they were really cool to look at. And I used to love to chat with the guys behind the tables because there were World War II veterans there. There were Korea conflict veterans, Vietnam veterans, and you'd hear the stories. So for $4, I could go and spend hours talking to the people who were really there. I used to love to do that. And I would bring our boys sometimes if they wanted to go. And we met some really cool people like Carlos Hathcock. And he was a sniper from Vietnam. And I got a chance to talk with him. I met Randy Weaver of Ruby Ridge. And I got a chance to talk with him. And so it was really neat to meet some of these people. And hear firsthand their stories. But one scenario plays in my mind, and that was there were two cops off duty from the police department, and they had a huge table of sealed ammunition, and they were selling it. And they were selling, and the numbers were like this. Let's say a box of ammunition, 9mm, would cost $16 if you bought it at a gun store. They were selling it for $3 or $4. And it wasn't defective, it wasn't damaged, so they had 9mm, 45, 40 caliber, shotgun shells, Ranger ammunition that was safe for police use only, black talons. I'm talking about Teflon-coated ammunition.
Yeah, I know it.
I'm talking about, the really expensive ammunition. I'm talking this was in the 90s, the early 90s. My question for you, and these guys, and I heard them. I was talking to people at nearby tables, and they'd say, yeah, we're cops and we're selling this. How is it possible that cops, off-duty, on a weekend, would be selling ammunition at 1/4 or less of what it was worth at a gun show for cash? And when we come back, you can let us know if you have any opinions about what you think that might have been about. I was there. I saw it. We'll be right back. Class, very important broadcast you're hearing. You're hearing firsthand from David what really happens. So I don't know who these people were at this gun show. I don't remember what they look like. This was decades ago. And I don't even remember exactly what the date was. I don't know. But I do know I saw these boxes of cartridges. Some of them were marked for police use only. Now, these are absolutely deadly projectiles. I'm talking about armor piercing. Okay, sometimes they're called cop killer bullets. The public can't buy them because, well, heck, they'll go through a bullet-resistant vest because they're Teflon coated. These are frangibles. These when they enter the body, they turn to dust, and like so many little tiny particles that surgeons can't get them out. These are designed to absolutely, positively kill people. And these are special bullets for the police. And these guys were selling them. Now, I don't believe the police should have them. I don't believe anybody should have them. Yeah, I think if you're going to shoot maybe just a lead projectile or a jacketed projectile, one that a surgeon can work on, I don't think anybody should have projectiles that will absolutely, positively kill you for sure with one shot. But that's what they were selling. These guys were selling cop killer bullets that we're not allowed to have. They were marked for police use only. Not all of them, but just some of them. David, what do you think was going on there? Why were these guys selling these things?
Well, there's a lot of things there. There's a lot of things there that play. I remember the whole debate about the black Talon bullets, and they were supposed to be for law enforcement only.
That's what I'm talking about.
I would not have touched them. And more than likely, yeah, there were cops selling them. If you get caught, you tell on them. Are they going to get in trouble? No, you are. You have the product. Okay? And that's what's going to happen. But I do know they had different ways of dealing with it. They would always go to the range in the day. There would be bullets come home, and they would just take bullets home. Or if they went in, they wouldn't turn in the rest of the bullets. And then, the 90s started coming along, and things. They issued credit cards. They started, and these guys would, if they had to, they would go to certain places that supplied the police with these products, and they would buy those bullets, and they had to show their credentials to get them or order them and have them shipped to their place. And yeah, they'd sell them. And why are they selling for such a cheap price? Because it's not their money buying them or ordering them. It's our money. They do not care. That was one thing that was always pointed out to me. They don't care if you sue. They don't care if you take them to court or if they even lose. It's our own tax dollars that they're using to fight us to do whatever they need to do. They're not out anything out of their pocket.
David,
so it doesn't matter to them.
What kind of items do the police steal from us? What is like number 1, 2, and 3 on their list? Like, if they're going to steal things from us, what do they like to steal the most, and do you know why?
I don't. The biggest thing I ever seen taken was guns. The guns were the big thing because they could always sell guns quickly at a pawn shop, no questions asked. They can walk in there, walk out with a handful of cash, and they didn't care how much they got for it. If they got 10% of the value, they didn't care. They're making 10% of the money. Doesn't matter. That was always the biggest thing I've ever seen them take. But I've seen them take all kinds of unique jewelry, anything. I've even seen them harass martial arts studios where they had nunchucks, brand new ones, in cases. So they were legal, and they were carrying them out and leaving class, and they'd wait till they got far enough away, pull them over, sorry, I need to confiscate those. And they would brag that they got them with a nice case.
David, you're making a lot of sense, and I'll tell you why. I don't frequent pawn shops, but I have been to them so I can understand how they work. Now, I understand that pawn shops are not allowed to sell stolen property. They're not allowed to sell it. And they have to, and when they receive guns, they have to notify the police that they have a gun with serial number 123. And they're required to do that. So what you're saying is, the reason that they probably get away with that is because the person that the gun was stolen from probably hadn't reported it because the cops were the ones that stole it.
I was standing right there, and not alone, and I seen one of them came in and had 3 guns. One was a very nice gun. I would love to have had it. It was a whole kit, a 41 ACP with a 45 kit. The whole kit, brand new. It was an expensive gun. And in the case, it was legal. And they said, if this guy shows up here and sees this gun, you're to let me know. If he has a problem with this. So it was in the case, it was legal. And they just, they didn't care.
David, you have opened a lot of eyes today about the way it really works, about who is committing these crimes, and how difficult it is for the little guy to survive. I
don't think I'll ever be free.
David, would you like to come back another time?
Yeah, sure.
David, I want to thank you. I know this was very difficult for you. Our class appreciates it, and so do I.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, David.